Hello and welcome back to the Terrace Podcast special Laws of the Game series. This time we will be talking about Law 10, determining the outcome of the match. My name's Craig Anderson. I'm joined by Euan Taylor.
Hello, Craig.
So, how do we determine the outcome of a match, Euan? What would you say would be the optimal way to do that?
Normally, the team that scores the most goals would win the game.
I think that's a good idea. Let's see if that's what IFAB think. So it starts off by talking about a goal being scored, which I guess is one of the key ways that outcomes of the match are determined. I don't know. I think we may actually have got to Law 10 without talking about what a goal is, which is quite quite an interesting approach. The goal is scored when the whole of the ball passes over the goal line between the posts and under the crossbar, providing that no offence has been committed by the team scoring the goal. So far, so good. We talked about what it means for the ball to cross the line in Law 9. If the goalkeeper throws the ball directly into the opponent's goal, a goal kick is awarded. I have never seen that. I have
impressive.
To say. I'm trying to think.
You feel?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Kelly had a goalkeeper. He was rubbish. Damien Rascal. He was French, and I think he had the best throws I've ever seen. He could definitely clear the halfway line. As could another rubbish goalkeeper, Ansi Yakola, who also had a really big throw on him. But even at that, I don't think maybe really, really wind assisted. But if the goalkeeper throws the ball into the opponent's net, then it's a goal kick. If he kicks the ball into the opponent's net, it's a goal. So interesting juxtaposition there. But I suppose the point being goals can't be scored by your hand, essentially. If the referee signals a goal before the ball has this bringing back trauma for me. If a referee, or it's not quite the same thing, but if a referee signals a goal before the ball has passed over the line, then play is restarted with a drop ball. That one's not really going to happen. I was thinking of the Stuart Finlay disallowed goalie in Cross County.
When he gave
in terms of the referee giving a free kick before the ball crossed the line,
it's a free kick,
or a penalty. But it didn't signal a goal. I think. This one is never really going to happen in practice because, I suppose the only time I think it could potentially happen is in a game with VAR or potentially with the assistant being a Jobsworth, where the referee gives a goal incorrectly where the ball hasn't crossed the line, then maybe the defender sclaffs the ball and then someone else scores a separate shot, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And if the referee has actually blown to stop the game, he's given the first goal. And then if VAR went and said, well, actually that wasn't in, then because the game had been stopped at that point, the goal couldn't be given. That would be an interesting one, I suppose.
That feels something that could happen, actually. If there's something fault with because it's normally a Hawkeye represented there with separate goal line technology, but if there was a fault with that or something, and it went down, but as the referee's watch went off, or it didn't, and he just had to give a goal, then I suppose you could sort of see something like that would happen, or in
our league, or the many that don't have goal line technology, I suppose the referee just making the decision wrongly.
Yes.
So it's worth talking about that. Hopefully that never happens, or hopefully it does in a game that is of no interest to any of us.
Yes.
Okay, that was a goal. Easy enough, and a nice wee picture for those of you watching on YouTube, showing you what a goal is. If there was any doubt there. The next part is the winning team. And you were right, Euan. The team who scores the greater number of goals is indeed the winner. And if both teams score no goals or an equal number of goals, don't forget that possibility, then the match is drawn. So we've got a win or a draw. And if the competition rules require a winning team after a drawn match or a home and away tie, the only permitted procedures to determine the winning team are the away goals rule, 2 extra time periods not exceeding 15 minutes each, which I guess technically means you could have shorter extra time. I've never known it, but feels like something they would do in America, or penalty shootout, or a combination of the above. Any combination of the above, and I think almost every combination of the above has been used at some point. Traditionally, UEFA was all 3. Now UEFA is not the first one, but is the second and the third. The SPFL League Cup. It's only the last. And the English League Cup used to be away goals rule, but only after 120 minutes as well. So there's been all sorts of weird rules in place there. But we're fairly confident that it's quite interesting. I would say actually that away goals rule isn't explained in more detail. Penalty shootout is explained later on. I guess away goals rule is like a competition rule, but it's funny that they couldn't just have clarified it.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, I always thought it was. Well, I mean, I don't know if away goals will ever go out of it completely. Obviously, it has in UEFA competitions, but yeah, I always thought it was a bit because this goes back a few years, so I don't know if it remained the case, and possibly not with like the sort of stratification of football in general with budgets and so on. But I remember reading that, like, considering that teams that were seeded normally played at home second, it was actually more common for teams that played at home first to go through, or almost identical. Which you would think, well, that's why is that? And actually, there was always an advantage because you had 30 minutes more to score an away goal.
Yeah.
And they still counted, so it actually wasn't fair. Yeah, I think it was a good thing that obviously there was a reason that it was drawn in the first place, but with travel and so on, it'd be a lot easier. Yeah, that reason went fell away. But there can't be that many tournaments now that would. I can't think of one that has away goals counting.
Not in Europe. I think it's still used in other continents.
Yeah, possibly like the African Champions League or whatever, and maybe even the Libertadores and so on. Maybe it would make sense to still have it in terms of certainly in South America. I suppose you have the altitude and things like that, don't you? Which make a massive difference. So maybe it's fair enough in those kinds of places, but in Europe, I would say, it's not really fair.
I agree, and I think I was quite supportive of it being scrapped, but I was surprised you still see people online like moaning about it, saying it it was about the lack of competition in like the Champions League or something. And someone was like, "Oh, we're scrapping the away goal rule." I'm like, how?
What's that got to do with it?
I mean, maybe that tiny wee bit that you mentioned there, but I don't think that's. It's like games will still like a game that was settled on away goals is, by definition, level on aggregate, so it's always going to be close. There's always going to be drama. It's not taking away any drama. The only drama it's taken is like the potential swing straight from one team winning to the other team winning, I suppose.
One goal changes it all. But I mean that can still, if it's a draw and one team scores a winner, then fair enough. That changes it. But
I'm supportive. And then we have the penalty shootout, which is the one that is described in detail. You can see already there's a bit of length to this. It's worth noting, penalty shootout used to always be called kicks from the penalty mark. That was how they were always described in the laws of the game, even though they were kind of colloquially described as a penalty shootout. That changed as of like this year or last year to just being penalties and penalty shootout, which is what everyone calls them anyway. But you'd still see contrarians using the old version, and I actually enjoy telling them that they're now wrong, because I think they think they're being smart, but they aren't being smart at this point. But there we go. Yes, and penalty shootouts are taken after the match has ended. You do see people talking about, why don't we have them before the game? Not allowed. And stupid also.
Yes, as well as several reasons.
And unless otherwise stated, the relevant laws of the game apply. A player who's been sent off during the match is not allowed to come back to take part in the penalties. And one that became better known thanks to Emi Martinez, the king of penalty shootouts, was warnings and cautions issued during the match are not carried forward into penalties. So if you've been booked during the game, you can then get booked again during the penalty shootout without being sent off. Which I think is quite curious that you can get 2 yellow cards in a game. But the justification for that is essentially that the penalty shootout is not part of the game. It is simply a separate thing being used to determine who the winner is, if that makes sense. Which is why East Kilbride FC's supposed winning run that included a penalty shootout victory isn't one, despite them pretending it is. So it happened with TNS as well, right? They were claiming but they beat East Fife on penalty. They were claiming this world record, and it's like, no, you beat East Fife on penalty. Sorry, it doesn't count. And then Airdrie beat them anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Right. So that's our penalty. So how does the penalty procedure work? And there's actually a lot of stuff that probably fans don't think about in terms of that. It's just kind of accepted. Unless there are other considerations, e.g. ground conditions, safety, etc., there will be a toying cost to decide which end the kicks are taken. Partick Thistle v Ross County v Partick Thistle in the playoff final is an example of that. The safety, I disagreed with the decision, I would say, but you can understand it's the referee. No one at football can really do much about that. There was also one with Birmingham City in the English Football League playoffs at some point where Trevor Francis was their manager. And they were talking late 90s here potentially, and there was construction being done on the stadium, which meant there was like an empty stand behind one of the goals. And they must have been the away team, but again, for safety reasons, they said you have to take it into the end where there was fans, which was the opposing team's fans, and he had a proper strop and like wanted to take his team off the pitch, and like they properly delayed. Like was delayed. Like I don't know if it was like just all mind games or what. I think they then lost, so it didn't work. But typically it'll be a separate coin toss, and there's actually 2 coin tosses. That means before penalties, because the first one is to decide which end the penalties are taken at, which I don't think involves someone choosing. I think it's like heads that end and tails the other end, basically. And it can only be changed for safety reasons or if the goal or playing surface becomes unusable. So technically, for example, say that in that Partick Thistle situation, they'd started taking the penalties up that end and there had been like flares getting thrown on or whatever nonsense. They could, in theory, have then moved the remainder of a penalty shootout down to the other end, or if which would be interesting. Half a penalty shootout at one end, half at the other. The referee will then toss the second coin, or the same coin a second time, but rather, usually. And the team that wins the toss will decide whether to take first or second. Historically, been a big advantage to taking first in terms of its balance, which is why they did, for an occasion, try that ABBA system.
Yes,
where it was like
I was just I hated that. Having to get the calculator out to work out who was taking the next penalty. Not for me.
Yeah, and that again, talking of Welsh teams in the Challenge Cup, I think it was TNS again had a penalty shootout against Livingston, where the referee, who was English for that game, used the ABBA system even though they weren't supposed to, because it wasn't in use in Scottish games, technically they let the result stand, but technically it was like an incorrect procedure. I think if Livingston had cared enough, they might have been able to take it further. But yeah, so that's no longer an option. That was just a trial thing that never got allowed, basically. Correctly, in my opinion, as well. With the exception of a substitute for a goalkeeper who's unable to continue, the only players who are on the field of play players who are legal players at the end of the game are allowed to take penalties. You can't make a sub for a penalty shootout unless you do it before the game finishes, basically. As I say, you can sub a goalkeeper, as it says. Each team is responsible for selecting the eligible players in the order which they will take the kicks, and the referee's not informed of the order. That's changed as well. It used to be that the referee was actually given the first 5 in order before the shootout started. Because when I was refereeing, I had a couple of penalty shootouts where that was the case. But they realised there was actually no point in doing that, because as long as every player is only taking it once, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
It also means teams can't change their order on the hoof if they want to. I don't think that will happen very often, but it could. And also, if at the end of the match one team has more than the other, one team has more players than the other, then the team with more players has to sit out players out of the shootout completely. So you can't pick your goalkeeper, because if you did, they wouldn't be able to save penalties either. So the ref will say who's gone. I always remember the first time I ever noticed that Kelly played, I think it was Airdrie in a League Cup tie at Rugby Park, like talking years ago, like the first Airdrie, just to lose some subscribers. I think it was. It might have been the second Airdrie, who knows? But they got someone sent off just before the end of extra time, and Jose Kitongo like disappeared up the tunnel, and we thought he'd just like bottled it or whatever, which I guess as an attacking player he probably had, but he was the player who'd been sat out basically from the penalties, which you see happen occasionally.
Yes.
If a keeper is injured or unable to continue, then if their team haven't used all their subs, then they can swap the keeper in. And I actually thought, thinking back to the Scottish Cup semi-final, Celtic Aberdeen, see when Kelly Roos had his like very weird moment when he went down, I actually thought it was maybe a bit of a ploy and he was going to go off and Ross Doohan was going to come on. Like maybe Ross Doohan was a penalty expert or whatever it would be. That never happened, but because that would be allowed. And if the goalkeeper if the substituted goalkeeper has taken a kick, then the replacement can't. But if the substituted goalkeeper hasn't taken a kick, then the replacement will, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So going on to during the penalties, it's only the players who can be on the park at that point, so coaches aren't allowed on. And apart from the player taking the kick and the goalies, everyone has to stay within the centre circle. Technically isn't actually what happens because the centre circle would be pretty crowded with 19 bodies in it, but they're spread out across the halfway line, close enough. Yeah. The goalkeeper of the kicking team must remain on the field of play but outside the penalty area on the goal line. Why you need to specify that, I don't know. I suppose just to say he's not distracting people. The goalkeeper, anyone can swap with the goalkeeper at any point, so if one of the centre halves fancies try to save some penalties, then they can swap in if they want to. Kick is only completed when this ball stops moving, goes out of play, or the referee stops play, but the kicker can't kick the ball a second time. And that's like, you've seen those like meme ones where like the ball hits the bar, bounces, or the keeper saves it and it goes like 50 feet in the air and then comes down and goes in.
Yeah.
The kick is still alive until it's not, basically. So it's like, I suppose if the goalkeeper saves it and then it bounces off the post back off him and goes in, that's still a goal.
Yes.
There's been attempts or discussions about stopping that, but that remains the laws at the moment.
It'd be kind of hard for it because I don't think anybody thinks that if you hit a penalty on target and the keeper gets a hand to it but it goes in, that shouldn't count as a goal.
Yes.
So how would you distinguish between it hitting off the post and coming back and hitting off? It's like, because it's almost like, that's the sort of thing where if it happened in general play, but that's an own goal. So but that's not like an official.
Yeah, that's not a
category.
There will be no mention of own goal in these laws.
You don't get like the dubious goals panel out to decide whether a penalty should count or not, that's basically what you're getting into. So I think that would be a difficult one for them to actually get rid of.
Yeah, and I guess the kicker may not play the ball a second time. Occasionally comes up where you have the double hits. Like St Mirren fans never shutting up about Bojan Miovski's goal at St Mirren Park at the start of 23-24 season, where I think he slipped a wee bit as he kicked it, and I think the ball went off his standing foot, which is technically not allowed, but no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah, VAR probably should, but if it exists. But they ignored it in that. That was like Aberdeen's only win for like 2 months or something as well. And
I'm glad it didn't intervene because that's like petty stuff. It didn't make any difference to anything that happened subsequently, I would argue. The referee keeps a record of the kicks, makes sure he knows who's taking them so that the same player can't take one twice. Goalkeeper commits if the keeper commits an offence, we talked about offences already, I think, from a goalkeeper in terms of being off his line or like shouting at people, I suppose, or doing anything distracting, then it's a retake. And it requires a retake, then the first time they'll just be warned, and the second time they'll be given a yellow card, and the third time they would be given a second yellow card, which hopefully not happen. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. It could though. Probably Emi Martinez again at some point. and if the kicker is penalised for an offence committed, then that kick's recorded as missed and the kicker gets a card. So I think the offence, I don't know what could the kicker do. The referee blows the whistle, the kicker runs up and shoves the goalkeeper over. That would mean that the penalty would be null and void, which actually seems a bit odd, but that the penalty would be counted as missed at that point. But more likely if they kicked the ball twice, which is what was talked about, they would get a yellow card.
There have been examples. Obviously, if you hit the penalty off the post and it comes straight back to you.
Yes.
And there's one I can't remember seeing that in a penalty, weirdly, but there was one. I think it was this season's either Europa League or Conference League where someone took a free kick, hit off the bar, and came back to them, and then they scored like a volley rebound. It was an amazing goal, and I'm sure it was like an injury time as well. And but it didn't count.
I don't know. I couldn't remember the details. I couldn't remember the details of the game, but it did happen.
It was a French. I think it was like Rennes. It was a French team, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the final game in the group stage, and it put them out, or it meant they didn't win the group or something as well.
That had an impact, and it was like that feels really annoying. Like that should get there. That's obviously not what that rule's meant to be for. But I suppose how else would you
use it? Yeah. So that's the offences and stuff. In terms of how the penalty shootout works, both teams take 5 kicks, unless, as will be described below, they don't need to. The kicks are taken alternately by the teams. Each kick is taken by a different player, and all eligible players must take a kick before any player can take a second kick. We know that part. Interestingly, I don't know exactly how it worked, but I was looking at some point at the history of penalty shootouts and try to work out when they started in Scottish football, and I noted that in Italy in the 1960s they used penalty shootouts in the Coppa Italia, but looking at the results from them, it seemed like they took 6 each, not 5, and it seemed like the same player could take them all if they wanted. So you'll go into these Coppa Italia scores, it's on Transfermarkt, and it will show you the same 6 penalties being scored by the same guy, which is an interesting twist.
I just remembered the classic example. It was more of an on their way goal shout, but it was Rangers when they won the Cup Winners' Cup in 1972. Famously lost the penalty shootout, but proceeded because the referee forgotten about the away goals rule, or had forgotten that they should count in extra time. I can't remember, but he got something wrong anyway. Rangers being in the penalty shootout, lost it, and then it turned out they should have gone through, and they did.
Won the tournament. Why not?
Indeed.
But referees can make mistakes too. If before both teams have taken 5 kicks, one team has scored more goals than the other could score, then no more kicks are taken, obviously. If after both teams have taken 5, the scores are level, kicks continue until one team has scored more than the other. Sudden death, essentially. And this is quite interesting because I think people don't often know this, and when you see these occasional super long penalty shootouts that go back round, the team can change the order of the kickers if they want to at that point. So the guy who's gone first doesn't have to go 12th.
Yeah. Yes, I suppose. I'm trying to think. It's not a penalty shootout that I witnessed per se at the time, but I witnessed someone listening to it on the radio. It was the Greek Cup final, which would have been in 2009, I think. And it was IFAB Athens against Olympiacos, and my wife at the time was Durham uni doing a masters, and one of our best pals, still a good pal, is a guy called Alex, Greek guy who's a big Olympiacos fan. And this was sort of before streaming was as easy, at least then as it is now. So he couldn't watch it, but he had Greek radio on. So this game, it was 4-4 after extra time. With I think Olympiacos. It was Matt Derbyshire. Remember him?
Yes, I was going to say. I was about to say, and then I thought it's your story.
Yes, so Matt Derbyshire was there, and he I think he scored a 96th minute equaliser. I think to take it into extra time, if IFAB Athens having scored a 90th minute winner, it appeared at the time, and there was 2 goals in extra time, and then the penalties went they went all the way round twice.
Perfect.
And it was like, because I'm pretty sure this was it's worth watching on YouTube, because also I'm pretty like Olympiacos had like a legendary captain at the time, like Djordjevic, who had the chance to take the winning penalty and he missed. And then it went all right around. And remember that George Clooney lookalike goalkeeper that the Greeks had,
Nicopolidis, yeah.
Yes, he ended up scoring the winning penalty. But it was the second. Okay. He scored both his penalties, but it was the second one, and the second time the goalkeeper, the captain's goalkeeper missed. So it was, it's like that. It's pretty much the best game of football of all time. That one. But I just watched a Greek man like having a meltdown, and not being able to understand what was happening. He was like trying to explain in his English, which wasn't amazing at the time. Well, there's this Greek guy going mental on the radio, and I'm going mental. He was like chucking stuff around the room. It was hilarious. But yeah, so it can go around more than once. It can basically could go on forever technically.
Yeah, I always think that theory that the game could literally never end. It's like that Isner Mahou tennis match. It will happen at some point. Like it was the Europa League final with Man United and Villarreal, where I think the first 21 penalties were scored or something. Did De Gea miss a penalty?
Yeah, De Gea missed a penalty and didn't save any.
He never saved one. Yeah. You do feel like at some point there's going to be like a ludicrously long one, like even longer than what was described, and everybody will be missing their trains home and whatever. The last one, if a player leaves the field of play during the shootout, for example, to go to the toilet, I suppose would be the most likely reason, then if it gets round to them and they're the last person that can take and they're still not back, then the kick will be forfeited. Never seen that, don't think we ever will, but never know. And then kind of disciplinary stuff during shootouts. A player, substitute player or team official can be cautioned or sent off during a shootout. If a goalkeeper is sent off during a penalty shootout, they have to be replaced by an eligible player. I.e., you can't bring a sub on if your goalkeeper was sent off. You can if they're injured. And any player other than the goalkeeper who's injured can't be replaced. So if you get an injury during a penalty shootout, like tough shit, I don't think they have to take a penalty, but they can't get someone else in to do it. And unlike during the game, if a team is reduced to fewer than 7 players during a penalty shootout, the game can continue. Not one that we would expect to see.
No.
Right, and we'll round this one off with a couple of questions for you on this process. Let's start with the top one. A goalkeeper is injured during kicks from the penalty mark. They've not updated that's IFAB. And is replaced by a substitute (brackets another goalkeeper). Doesn't have to be, I guess. Technically, you could bring your left back on to play in goals in the shootout. What is the further procedure?
So the goalkeeper, the sub goalkeeper, isn't allowed to take a penalty if the goalkeeper has already taken one, unless it loops back round, I imagine. And then that's it pretty much, isn't he? Just he cracks on.
Yeah, perfect. It's an odd question, but there we go. Right, these are not laws of the game questions. These are not about this one, so we'll skip over these. These are old questions. A goalkeeper is injured during kicks from the penalty mark and is unable to continue. The team has already used 3 substitutes. May the injured goalkeeper be replaced?
Well, yes. Should be.
Yes, but this is. Yes. It does say that. It does say that. Okay. I thought they've gone 3 substitutes, but yeah. They can be replaced by existing players as well, I suppose. But they can be replaced by a substitute. It is an old question because it says a substitute if the competition rules allow an extra substitute in extra time. Yeah. There we go. And the final one: can the goalkeeper score by throwing the ball from his/her penalty area into the opponent's goal?
No.
There's the main thing we've learned today. All right, Euan, thank you again for joining me for law number 10.
Thank you, Craig.
and we'll be back next time with Law 11. We are getting in Law 11 is offside, so we're getting into those three big ones, I would say: offside, fouls and misconduct, and free kicks, and the other ones that we will spend the most time on, no doubt.
Yes.